Hey everybody, welcome to G4G on YouTube. It is Napalm Dawn, as you would expect, and today we're in Marvel Snap, and we're going to be talking about Marvel Snap's first over-the-air update, or the OTA update, as they're calling it, and we're taking a look at it here, April 27th, at the end of April. So if you're not too familiar with what OTA is, or what over-the-air is, it is usually a term that refers to when you update the ROM or the operating system on an Android phone. If you have a Samsung phone and it's one that's keeping up to date and it gives you that message, hey, I've got like an important update for you. Do you want to schedule it? Do you want to do it now? That's called OTA, or over-the-air update. In Marvel Snap's terms, what they're doing over here is the OTA update has the ability to change the numbers on cards without actually really changing the text and changing a lot of its abilities. So let's go ahead and take a look at what we've got going today on April 27th. So their first OTA card balance targets Lizard, Shanna, Sandman, and Enchantress. And these are the ones that we're going to be talking about today. Lizard goes from a 2/5 to a 2/5, so he stays the same in terms of cost and power. However, he goes down to a -4 instead of a -3 if the opponent has 4 cards on their side of the field. Interesting card. They're doing it because Lizard often would be a cheap and fairly powerful endgame card that you could drop turn 5, turn 6, potentially maybe even get boosted when you kind of know how the field is going to play out. So Lizard now is nerfed because it is becoming more of a risk-reward scenario. I personally think that I would like to see a deck full of the goblins and dropping a Viper on Lizard, sending Lizard over, and then choking out my side of the field where I had sent Lizard over. I was discussing that with a friend of the channel, Darth. He thought that it might not be a particularly good idea. It is not a end game win because he would still have a 2-1 on the side of the field, but it could be interesting in disrupting play. They're all of a sudden facing a card on their side of the field that they're not expecting, and you largely have the power to trigger that card if you build a deck around it. We're talking things like having Debris, Squirrel Girl, Doom, Brood, I think would be a really good one for this. Ultron. There's a couple cards that I could see screwing up Lizard going over to the enemy side. I mean, I think there's obviously far better ones to use with Viper, like comboing over a Void from Sentry. However, Lizard is a little bit more accessible than things like Sentry. You get Lizard fairly early on, not a particularly expensive card. Not, necessarily a bad one to go. And if you think that the gameplay is not going to go your way to Viper it over, just keep him on your side, and now you've got a 2/5. So it's a nerf, but I think it could be interesting to use Lizard as a form of sabotage. Simply also the way you could Viper over an Electro, you drop Electro, you get the benefit of the +1 energy, but then you can only play one card gets Vipered over, which could be interesting. It's a combo that I've wanted to do for a little bit, but unfortunately haven't really got around to trying. So Shanna has gone from a 4/2 to a 4/4, which is a straight inline buff. We'll discuss that in a little bit. Sandman nerfed from 5/5 to 5/3. You'll remember that he was recently buffed and he became part of a deck style called Electro Ramp, and now he's gone down slightly because he's been overperforming. Meanwhile, Enchantress, according to Second Dinner, Enchantress has been underperforming despite the fact that she's a counter to several deck archetypes running now. So they're buffing her to try and compensate for that. They're basically saying that they weren't seeing Enchantress as much as they expected, yet cards like Cosmo and Armor tend to be out there as reasonable counters, whereas Enchantress really isn't. So let's go ahead and discuss what Second Dinner is saying about these cards. By the way, with OTA, it means they can fix things super easy. They don't have to submit. They don't have to create a situation where people have to download again. They don't have to certify a version, like say on the Google Play Store, where, okay, we were at 1.02, now we're going to be at 1.04 and push things out. Maybe some people are getting it, some aren't. We've seen people complaining about issues with Steam recently where there were crashes. Android users, I believe, were having crashes also. OTA allows them to fix the cards with literally zero impact to the player. So here's Shanna, formerly 4-2, now 4-4. Add a random 1-cost card to each location. Again, this is sort of what started me thinking about doing a Viper Lizard combo, because this could be another card that could beef up the zone where you just sent over Lizard. Shanna has fallen a bit flat since the release, even during the height of Zabu's might. She was a low-performing, a little bit of a rhyme there, the height of the might. She was a low-performing 4-cost card, and we wanted to give her a better chance to shine. The buff is simple, but highlights that Shanna is, I guess it's Shanna and not Shanna, because it's not IA. So Shanna wasn't being appropriately compensated for needing 4 available slots to hit her ceiling. In general, cards and decks that fill many slots early are safer to make strong, since there's plenty of game left to react to retreat, or the ability to gain cubes is impeded. It's especially true in Shanna's case, where the randomness and existence of cards like Killmonger make her riskier, so hopefully the power is enough. So they're beefing up her risk reward by saying, okay, if she drops on 4 and somebody Killmongers on 5 or 6, at least she was a 4-4 and not a 4-2. It has been pointed out that when you look at 1-cost cards, you have a fairly good breadth of negatives and positives in the 1-cost. You have a hood that you could pull in, which would be a -2. That's dangerous. Sunspot that late in the game, not particularly great. Bast could potentially screw up your card. So 1-1 is one of the more common ones you could do out there. But then again, you could start pulling in high power cards like Ebony Maw, or maybe even Titania. So mathematically speaking, she's largely going to be a 4-4 pulling in, on average, another 2 power or so. Higher in the curve, you're going to get potentially a 3, a 5, or a 7 power, but most likely you're going to pull in a... actually, I take that back. You're most likely going to get 2 power per card, so she is going to be a 4-4, bringing in another 4 power. So she could essentially become the equivalent of a 4-8. And if you're running her, you're going to know that you're leaving room for those 1-cost cards out on the field. And potentially, if you've already choked out your locations, you're dropping a 4-4, which isn't too bad. If we go and take a look at the 4-cost cards, at least the ones that I have, 4-4 is pretty much middle of the pack. Moon Girl, Rescue, of course, have amazing effects that bump up their 4-4 excessively. Same for Kazar, Drax, if you get lucky. Miles Morales. Warpath is rather niche. Omega Red is very niche. And of course, then we'll have Enchantress coming in at 4/6. Namor, Rock Slide, a no power thing, a White Queen. So she's by herself, she's worth about the tiny lower end of the middle of the curve of the 4-cost cards. Lizard. When one card becomes a clear outlier in play rate because it's playable in a huge number of decks, I kind of didn't really know Lizard had been that popular, but then again, I'm not up there in the upper echelons because I usually tend to favor getting my season pass out of the way rather than fighting my way up the ladder, despite nearly being done with pool 3. We can get to that in a little moment. That doesn't mean we always take action. It is important for us to keep in mind that the series structure can serve to make cards appear overplayed just simply because they're widely available. So what they're saying is it's not that a lot of people are running the card because he wins a lot or he's so great. They're saying that you see the card a lot because he's a very accessible card. And that's why I was saying that I think the Viper Lizard combo could be fun because you could pull it off, at least from Lizard's perspective, lower down in the ranks. Whether or not you get lucky to pull Viper, that's a different story. You could just still run Lizard the way that he is and just hope that you don't suffer the -4, or potentially Viper Luke, or maybe, excuse me, not Viper Luke, Lizard Luke, maybe even potentially have an Ironheart that kind of negates some of the drop that he's going to get, or a Bishop, potentially a Shuri. Shuri Lizard could be an interesting risk reward over there. It still gets his power reasonable if he gets screwed over, but if he doesn't, then you've got, a pretty cheap combo card on your hand. However, when we have a clear top card for the cost and can slice a little bit of strength away from it without necessarily dethroning it, that's largely a solid change for us to make. So this is what's happening with arguably the softest nerf we've ever made. I do believe this is a very kid gloves nerf. It is catching an egg in bubble wrap as much as you possibly could. Like literally catching and just kind of easing it down as you're catching. It is a very soft nerf. This is not a drastic change. You're just moving the needle slightly on risk reward over there. Sandman was 5/5, now dropping to a 5/3, straight in line nerf, no other changes. As they pointed out, he used to be a 4/1, and when he was a 4/1, he was rather garbage. Like, he just didn't see that much play. When he became a 5/5, which kind of shut down Zoo decks and shut down some of the combos that we've even mentioned here, he became really solid, and he changed it from Zoo decks potentially being the winning ones to very heavy-handed decks. And if you can get them out a little early with Wave so that you can get other big cards out on 5 and 6, single big hitters, or getting him out on 4 so that you can skip 5 to drop Infinite on 6, She-Hulk, something like that. That's pretty good. So being up at 5/5 meant he had a lot more power than just his ability, so he became worth it. The bump from 4 to 5 hurt him a little bit, but then again, Wave can knock him right back down. So since Sandman's changed from 4/1 to 5/5, we've seen him become a foundational piece of the Electro-based strategy, which is Electro Ramp. Slows down the opponent, makes his effects feel asymmetrical by contesting multiple lanes with Dr. Doom or just some heavy hitters. That's certainly the deck we expected to see, but it's become more popular than we'd like. This tap on the main man makes him a little less competitive source of power, but giving him the added edge to players committing cards early and making the endgame choices of the player more likely to ultimately determine the outcome of the game. And then finally Enchantress, who gets just a straight up buff. She went from 4/4 to 4/6. She removes the abilities from all ongoing cards at this location. It's been particularly telling to us in a world where Armor, Patriot, Darkhawk, Devil Dinosaur, Sandman, Blue Marvel, and even Null are the major players that Enchantress is a poor performer against, with both popularity and winning not being as high for her as they would like. There are mitigating factors, of course, energy curves, priority battles, and so forth, but ultimately, she's not functioning as a solid counter for all of these ongoing cards, especially the symmetrical ones that Rogue can't interact with. Hopefully this change lets her contest locations in addition to neutralizing major power problems like Darkhawk, which I actually just went up against, and a big turn 6 from an early Sandman. So again, she just gets kind of like Shanna, a buff to go ahead and live on her own a little bit better. So some of the matches that I had here recently, I ran into some of the things that we're talking about, but these were all pre-OTA. So this is a fun one. Actually, that wasn't it. So here was friend of the channel, Darth. I was running his Destroy deck and ran into my first Thanos deck that seemed to perform really weirdly, even though I wasn't quite prepared for a Thanos deck. I'm like, okay, I know these exist, haven't really read up on them, only know so much about the stones and everything. His destruction over there wound up feeding my deck quite a bit, and I had a lot of really, really solid luck this whole way through. Over here on Xandar with Venom, I had a Demon over there, and I had a Nova and a Wolverine, who then came back over here to join up with Death and Winter Soldier and Carnage and everything. Yondu sniped one of his stones. That is potentially why things went bad. I believe... Let's see. Draw a card. Yeah, I sniped his Soul Stone. I think that's what may have happened over there, because his Space Stone and his Time Stone did go out. Shuri went out, but I'm not too sure what else was going on over there. Against Steel over here, this was the first time I ran into a Darkhawk, and this was kind of interesting. So he dropped a Darkhawk over there, and then he wound up dropping a Cosmo over there, really kind of shutting this lane down. The power was too high. Cosmo basically said anything you're trying to put over here was useless. So I got super, super lucky on Danger Room with Ant-Man and Mr. Fantastic over there. Dropped a Claw, and then had Mystique clone the Claw, which really helped my Sacred Timeline. He dropped a Devil Dinosaur, and I had Rogue in hand, and I was like, okay, I know what I'm going to do over there. I'm obviously going to steal his Devil Dino, which I could not do over here thanks to Cosmo. So this was kind of a smart play. I feel like if this was a bot that knew what I was doing, he Cosmo'd the Darkhawk to protect against a Rogue. Unfortunately, because he had two cards doing basically almost the same thing, but like slightly differently, I was holding the Rogue to get Devil Dinosaur. So on the round 6, I dropped the Rogue, which stole the Mystique, who had flipped and copied Devil Dino, and there was a boost over there from Hawkeye. So that was pretty interesting. Weird World, this one worked out in my favor. Both players drawing from their opponent's deck. He was running a Destroy deck over here, and this was my ongoing deck because I was trying to do the play 6 power cards, and I rogued his Claw, if I remember correctly, which boosted my Weird World, and then I drew a Sentry from his deck And I basically said, okay, I'm giving up on Throne Room. So I'm like, that's fine. I'll drop a 10 power over here and you can have my Void. That was the give me lane over there. So that was particularly interesting. This was the ongoing deck that I was running to try and get Spectrum and Onslaught out there for my mission and everything. And one last thing that I want to go over here is that I pulled Dazzler and designed a deck that I actually have and thought that this could be an interesting Dazzler deck. And I wanted to go over it with you quickly. It's probably flame worthy. It may not be the best thing in the world, but it looked like it just could be fun. So Dazzler, in case you don't know, says if you have 4 cards at each location, she gets +6 power. So Mystique is in there to maybe potentially clone that. So early game, there's a Wasp in there to just basically maybe sneak it in a location. Like if they see Dazzler out there on the field and you've got a 0 cost who could come turn 5 or turn 6, that's where Wasp is good. Squirrel Girl beefs up the lanes. Iron Fist into multiple man is a way to beef up the lanes. Misty Knight is there to just get a little bit of a benefit from Patriot, be cheap. Angela's designed to get out early and have cheap cards, stack her lane. Hopefully, the way that it goes is round 1, the ultimate way would be round 1, Iron Fist. Round 2, multiple man. Round 3, Patriot or Brood or Debris. Round 4, Dazzler. Round 5, Mystique. And then an Ultron if you had it, or Doctor Doom in round 6, hopefully clogging up all of the lanes. But there was a slight problem on that. I pulled Space Throne on the one time that I was using this deck, and I dropped Brood in there. Space Throne says you can only play 1 card here. I'm like, haha, I'll be smart. I'll play Brood, and I'll get Brood's clones over there. You know, there we go. 6 power for 1 play. No, Brood didn't activate. And I was like, that doesn't really follow the mechanics of the game. If it was Mysterio, it would make sense because Mysterio's illusions are played, quote unquote. Things like Brood, Doctor Doom, Debris, all of those others they add, they don't play. So I was really, really, really surprised to see Brood not activate, and that kind of screwed things up. I was like, yes, everything is finally working out on this deck. This looks pretty good. I think it's going to go the way that I want it to go. And then Brood didn't wind up creating clones. So, yeah, that was that. Disappointed in that. Anyway, wrapping up the video, since I always kind of give you guys a little bit of a touch base with how cards and everything have been going for me. My favorite deck lately has been the Agatha Harkness deck that I've been running, that Darth Plato had collaborated with me on this one based on like what he likes to use for Agatha, and I grabbed it and went with what I had for it. It's pretty simple. Round 2, Domina goes out. Round 3, hopefully either Wave or Lady Sif. I like Sif the most. Agatha gets discarded. You Ghost Rider Agatha back onto the field, which is a nice zombified deck from Magic the Gathering. I kind of like that mechanic. Once Agatha is discarded or played off of Wave or Sif, then you're in control of the deck. And what I like to do there is my ultimate play is like Red Skull, Taskmaster cloning it. If it's a Wave scenario, Agatha plays herself, then Taskmaster can clone it. A lot of times, unsung card for me, Devil Dino has come in and be the victor. When I'm looking at the field and I'm thinking, okay, it's turn 6. Could I America? Could I maybe Spider-Woman or Arrow? Devil Dino is the one that is just sitting there in my hand going, dude, I got this. Put me in, coach. And I do. And I wind up getting a lot of wins out of it. But yeah, don't ever I made this mistake once, and I learned very, very quickly. Don't expect Ghost Rider to pull out Agatha and then Taskmaster the Agatha. That doesn't happen. She has to be played. If you Taskmaster that combo, you wind up getting Ghost Rider, which is a bit of a waste. Hit Monkey deck that I've been running: Sunspot, Bast to make cheap cards. Angela, Hit Monkey, Mysterio, because Hit Monkey says +2 power for each other card you played. Mysterio combos well with him because the illusions are considered played, not added. So just dropping Mysterio in front of Hit Monkey is really cool. Mystique to copy Iron Man. There's Bishop, Rogue, Thor, because playing Mjolnir is cheap. Jane pulls Mjolnir out of the deck. Mr. Negative flips some costs, so good things that you want to flip with Mr. Negative in this deck would be somebody like Iron Man is pretty solid. Rogue, Bishop, if they're all in your deck, dropping Mr. Negative is pretty handy over there. If Mystique's not out yet, being able to play her for 0-3. The goal is basically to get a lot of zeros so you can go a bunch of zeros and then Hit Monkey, and then Hit Monkey has a nice little boost over there. Did pick up She-Hulk since the last video, so been running this as a She-Hulk deck. Kind of fun. The goal here is to basically like Viper over the hood and send a -2 over to the enemy team, or even Black Widow, because she's just, she's a 1 power. So you can just clog up the enemy lane with a 1 power being over there. You drop her, she does her duty, gives you the Widow's Bite shot, and then you can send her over. She just chokes out a lane. And there's the Don't Dazzle Me Bro deck that I just showed you guys from the Snap webpage. And let's see, I think that is pretty much about it. Bast in the Saddle is a Bast deck that I have when I got Bast. That is not Mr. Negative related. What Bast does is set the power of all cards in your hand to 3. So you have a lot of cheapies and zeros like Iron Man and Ironheart that when you drop Bast, they become 3-3 and 5-3 respectively. White Tiger goes up to 5-3, so she just becomes a little bit more powerful. Basically, she's got the power to boost just about everybody in the deck. And same thing for Brood. Brood goes up to a 3-3, but he'll still drop the Broodlings at 2. My Electro ramp was Daredevil, Electro Wave, Absorbing Man. Shang-Chi basically is plug and play. Same thing for Professor X. Sandman, Arrow, Arnim Zola, Doctor Doom, Odin, and Magneto. So basically the hope there is that you take Doctor Doom or Odin or Magneto, drop him on turn 5 with the boost from Electro, and then on turn 6 you Arnim Zola and send a bunch of Dooms and Odins everywhere. So that's what I've got going on. 4 days left to the Animals Assemble season here at 48. And currently sitting at 27, so I'll probably have 30 by the end of the season, which will be nice. Alright guys, Napalm Dawn signing off here for this OTA update in Marvel Snap. Have a good one, folks.